Go ahead.
Okay, this is going back to last week and
Last month.
last meeting. How about that? And there was a section during the meeting that really concerns me when I watched it, the whole meeting. And what I did was create a small little transcript of it, which I've just passed out. I've also posted that snippet of video out on granitrock.com. It's also out on the LRPA folks put it out on YouTube as well, so you can see the entire meeting. And I urge that if you miss a little bit, that's a good place to go to get it back. But the part that really disturbed me, because it really comes down to a couple of different things, and after watching politics intently for 10 years, there's generally people who want to get something done. There are other people who want to just be somebody. But after rereading the transcript and watching the video a couple of times, there's a third option. And what I'm getting to is a lot of last meeting we spent time talking about the narratives, about that they are very large in some cases with a lot of money, and trying to put those into line items, GL accounts, so that we could do the A to B comparisons. I'm not going to rehash that all over again.
Because it didn't pass.
I know.
And
But
Joe is not here, and this is about Joe.
No, it's not just about
Perhaps we should
Joe.
wait until a meeting when Joe is here.
No, I would rather discuss it now instead of letting it sit. Because Sean also agreed with Joe, and that gives me rise for concern. I understand that Joe Wernick hasn't been a part of the Budget Committee, may not know everything that goes on. But when Sean says that's micromanagement, about going over the GL account numbers, that's our purpose. And if that is, and I'm going to ask you, Sean, if that's your view, or I should ask better without predisposition, what do you see the role of the Budget Committee being if we don't discuss and manage the GL accounts?
I guess, Skip,
Because if we're not doing anything at the GL account level, this whole process is a farce and a big waste of time.
I don't see it that way. But when I see, sorry, I'm just,
No, take your time.
no, I'm trying to think of how to say it without, and I just don't know how to answer that without, I guess my problem is this, Skip. I understand what you are saying in a way, but when I take a look at the role of this committee, I just don't see this committee telling this gentleman and his board and that gentleman and his board what to do. That is not our role. If we bring stuff up and ideas, that's one thing. But when we tell the school board and the Board of Selectmen what to do, that is not the role of this committee. And that is what I meant.
Then what is the role of this committee? We're supposed to be responsible for the town folks' tax monies. If we're not going to change anything, what is the role of the Budget Committee?
Excuse me, I don't believe you ever said we weren't going to change anything. We're going to look at things. It was more a question of how things were presented than anything.
No, there was also.
We should not be micromanaging. The managers, the people that actually create the budgets, that we oversee them, we make sure they're valid and they're right for the town. We're overseeing what they've done. We're not managing the whole town. There's a big difference there.
My feeling is that we are all taxpayers on this board, and we, in a sense, represent all the taxpayers. And even if one taxpayer, whether he's on this board or not, wants to know those details, I believe that they have a right to know those details. And they need to be, if they want to see them in a certain format, the town manager or the superintendent should be able to provide that. It's not a necessary micromanagement. We're not telling them what to do.
Well,
We just
no,
want to see it in a certain format.
I was referring to the fact that they keep referring to this micromanaging, and really, I think we have to know what's going on, yes. But the people who are managing the budgets are the ones presenting them to us, and then we are.
But we as taxpayers, all of us, have a right to see it the way it's comfortable for us.
Nothing should be hidden. Within reason, yeah. I mean, it's got to be there. It's got to be complete.
And if somebody is asking for line items or some sort of a limit of what can be dumped into those buckets, or how big is that? You know, we got into all that minutia last week or last month. We just like to have some sort of a way to understand what's there from year to year so we can have a track record.
Kristen?
So we discussed this a month ago, we voted, it was decided. Are you trying to reopen what has already been decided?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm trying to bring up a different point, which I
Okay.
think everybody has missed.
Okay, could you say it again, please?
My question to Sean is, if we are not going to manage the tax monies, what are we doing? Now, what Joe said, and here I tried to get the transcript as close as I could. His example was to talk about athletic uniforms. It could be another police car. It could be a fire engine. It could be a DPW truck. If the people, I see the role of this budget committee is to say, we need to be good stewards of the tax monies to which we've been entrusted, because it isn't the school board or the selectmen that are presenting the budget to be voted upon. It's us. That is our responsibility. And when I hear that we shouldn't change a GL line item because that's micromanagement, but if I believe that buying that additional vehicle or doing this other thing or this other thing, or we as a whole budget committee decide that's not a good use of the money at this time, that is our proper role. But to be saying that we shouldn't be looking at those GL accounts and touching them because they've already gone through several different layers. Well, unfortunately, government isn't efficient. In fact, it's set up to be inefficient when you really look at it, because we're yet another level. But we're the folks that present it to the town folk. And if we're just going to pass it through, all we become is a rubber stamp. And I don't think that's our role or our responsibility.
Chris, did you want to say something?
No. No, go ahead.
I think you've picked out 30 seconds of a 2-hour meeting. You've bolded certain statements that were not said in a loud fashion, and they looked like they were said in a loud fashion.
They were.
This was a much longer discussion. There's one statement about micromanagement in a 2-hour discussion. And I don't think that that's a fair microcosm of what the entire discussion was.
You're right. Most of the discussion I was trying to bring up was about the transparency and the GL items. I was never the one who brought up the word micromanagement. It was brought up, and it was a very small amount of time. But where Sean agreed with Joe, it gives me concern, because if that is the modus operandi that's going to be followed during this budget season, that basically, okay, we talked about it, that's the end of it at the subcommittee and at the full committee level, and we do nothing about it, then we're all wasting our time. If the fence has already been erected without doing what most of us might see as being something to be done, and again, we have to vote on stuff. Why I brought this up is that if we are predisposed to do nothing about either budget, then we are failing the voters that put us on this committee.
I don't think saying micromanagement says we're predisposed to do nothing. I think that is incorrect.
I think that that statement set a tone for the rest of the discussion. And that statement could flow, if we don't hash it out right here,
Then
it could
if
flow,
you-
like as Skip says, become a rubber stamp.
If the person who said that is the issue, then perhaps this should be discussed when that person is able to be here and is not at a graduation for a school that he works at.
Skip, you had set the tone on that,
Yes.
right? Agreeing with him.
And
So-
I guess, Skip, I don't see us as a rubber stamp. I never have.
No.
But I also don't see us telling these two gentlemen and their boards and all the other department heads how to do it. And
Well, how do you rectify the two then, Sean? How do you reconcile both of those statements?
Mr. Chair, I wasn't here last year, and I can't speak for the school, I can only speak for the town side. But this board does a good job, regardless of how they get or arrive at the end result, this board does a good job, or this committee. Judged by the fact that when it was a warrant article, it was overwhelmingly kept here. And I gotta tell you, it'd be different if you guys got the budgets directly from the department heads. But the department heads are given marching orders by Scott Dunn. So they're already kind of cutting it a little bit as it is. Scott gets a hold of it, he does his thing to it, and we get a hold of it, and we do our thing to it. By the time you get it, you're getting I don't want to say the leanest possible budget, but you're getting a budget that's been gone through heavily. And while there may not be a lot of fat on it, in the past you guys have, I've served 2 terms on the board, on this committee, and we always managed to find something that we felt could be cut, and we did. And I think the townspeople appreciate that. How we get there, that may be different, but I think, I don't want to say it's a thankless job, because I'm learning a lot about the people that serve on town committees. We couldn't live without them.
Yeah. And there's been times when this board added money as well. But that meant that we had to change a GL account to do that. And that's all I'm trying to get across. There may be times during this budget season we may want to add. I remember the fire, not the fire truck, but oh gosh, I'm missing the way back when the forestry truck for the fire department. It needed to be done. Some stuff was done to it. More money was added to the budget, so we changed the GL account. There's been other times we have subtracted from a GL account. But I'm going to agree with Peter, and he probably put it better than I did. It set a tone, Sean, that you basically said, we're not going to touch the GL accounts. And that concerns me. And that's all I'm trying to get across.
no, that's fine, and I don't want it to come across like that.
Just a question for Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Just how many accounts do you want to go that deeply into? All of them, or just a handful, or what? Because I agree with Peter that you got a right to know.
Well, we review all of the GL accounts, every single one. Either when you're sitting on a subcommittee or we're doing it here. I like to play with the data, and I do all of them all the time. I'm trying to shuffle them back and forth. I don't expect anybody else to do that, but there's been times when I've caught stuff going, this isn't right, and I brought it up and things got changed. Not all the time, but I want to make sure that a firewall isn't being put up that says, okay, you get to look at it, and that's it. That's not the correct way to do this.
You know, in the end, we have to vote on these issues, and they show up on the ballot, and the voters, many of them, look at our vote, and if they're leaning one way or the other, they might decide, well, maybe that is more fair to approve that than I'm leaning towards, because the budget committee's already, had a look at it. And then there's the other issues where we've had the past, we need a police impound lot. I don't, argue that we don't need it, but when we find it placed in the town budget instead of the police budget, well, we want to change that. We want to have that in the proper space and in the proper budget so that it doesn't look like the town is absorbing something like that versus the police department having a larger overtime budget or something, and then, but at the bottom line, that looks okay because the impound lot isn't included in their budget. We moved it. This is our job, is to examine these lines, items, and give the voters guidance.
Well said.
Anything else? Yep.
So, in essence, when you said micromanagement, you did not mean then we won't be changing GL accounts if necessary. Okay?
Mr. McDonough.
By changing GL, you mean the amounts that are in the GL accounts, what you're talking about? The ones we go through line by line?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking
And because that's what we have, that's what we're supposed to be doing. According by the RSAs, if we see something that's wrong, we have the power and the responsibility, more the responsibility than the power from my standpoint, to make changes in the best interest of the town and the school board, regardless of how the budgets that were prepared were given to us. It doesn't matter how many layers it's already gone through. Our layer is the one that's presented to the town folk. So we need to do the best that we can given what we've been given and what we believe to be the best thing to do or suboptimal things to do.
Well, we've done that for the last 3 years I've been on this budget committee, so I mean, I don't see that changing.
Well, I hope not, but again, when I listened during the meeting and then when I played the video back, it caught my eye and I felt that it was the right thing to do to bring it in front of the rest of the board to make sure, or the committee rather, to make sure that we are all in agreement of what it is the proper role of the budget committee is. Because it wasn't clear from that. And unfortunately, one of my favorite questions is, what is the proper role of government? And you can take that at whatever level of government you want, but unless you are in agreement of that, bad things happen.
Well, perhaps then you might have cited RSA instead of put this verbal together, because this seems like an attack of some sorts. And I wasn't here, so I apologize. I was not here. I was unable to make it. I think that if we stick to the things that are RSA related, what is the description of what we are here for and what it is to do, I think we all agree that our role here in the budget committee and getting it from the heads to us, knowing that it's already gone through certain layers, and yes, we're the final stop before it gets out there. I think that we all know that it is our job, and to call out terms I don't think is necessarily the right way. We need to do our job. We need to do a job for the taxpayers that are here, and we got to do it together. And we need to feel comfortable with each other. We're all under the subcommittees together, so I think we really need to work well together on this and agree that we're here to follow the RSA laws and help the town of Guilford.
Yeah. I don't know the exact clause off the top of my head, but the general RSA is RSA 32 that governs the budget committee.
Nice.
Croc TV.